Picture a world where the most powerful resource isn't oil, or territory, or even advanced weapons. It's the ability to produce intelligence at scale. Not human intelligence in the classic sense, but machine-assisted intelligence. The data you generate, the models that interpret it, and the systems that turn it into decisions. Because in today's economy, whoever controls the intelligence pipeline can shape markets, influence politics, guide public opinion, and quietly decide what's efficient, what's risky, what's true, and what's worth funding. That brings us to a phrase you're going to hear more and more over the next few years: intelligence sovereignty. Who controls the world's data? Who controls the platforms that process it? And who gets to decide what the algorithms optimize for? Welcome back to the B.I channel, where data meets decisions. I'm Soren Hale, and today we're going to map out a new frontier that's becoming one of the defining geopolitical struggles of the next decade: the global contest for control over data, AI platforms, and intelligence flows. Joining me is strategist and founder of the B.I channel, Nikiema. If you've listened before, you know Nakel has a talent for turning complicated power shifts into something you can actually see and measure. Nakel, welcome back.
Always good to be here, Soren. And this is one of those topics that sounds abstract at first, but once you see the mechanics, you realize it's urgent. A lot of countries and a lot of organizations are already behind, and they don't even know it.
Let's start with a clean definition, because people hear sovereignty and immediately think borders, passports, flags. What do you mean when you say intelligence sovereignty?
I mean the ability of a nation, a region, or even a major organization to control for things. 1, its data. 2, the AI systems that interpret that data. 3, the pipelines that turn information into usable intelligence. And 4, the decision processes that come out the other end. So it's independence, but not the old kind. It's independence from external influence in the systems that shape what you know and what you do.
That's an important distinction, because people might hear that and say, okay, you're talking about privacy. Keep personal data safe. But you're saying it's bigger than that.
Much bigger. Privacy is part of it, but intelligence sovereignty is about ownership and control of the intelligence that shapes your economy, your security, your institutions, your society. If you don't control the systems that create intelligence, then you don't fully control your future. Someone else can set the rules of the game, and you end up reacting inside their architecture.
Okay, let's pull that thread. When did this become a flashpoint? Because AI and global data flows didn't start yesterday. Why does it suddenly feel like everybody's waking up at the same time?
It's the convergence. 3 things are hitting at once. First, AI platforms are no longer just tools. They're becoming geopolitical actors. When a handful of platforms mediate search, commerce, logistics, cloud computing, developer ecosystems, and now generative AI, they start to function like infrastructure. And infrastructure is power. Second, data crosses borders faster than laws can follow. Your citizens generate data on foreign apps. Your companies run their operations on foreign cloud. Your public services rely on software built elsewhere. And the legal system is trying to govern a borderless flow with border-based rules. Third, countries fear dependency. Because dependency in the intelligence layer is not like dependency in the old industrial layer. If you rely on foreign intelligence systems, you could be economically pressured, strategically surprised, or quietly steered without realizing it.
So you're basically saying the platform itself becomes part of national security.
Exactly. People used to think national security was about military supply chains, energy supply chains, and critical minerals. Now we're adding intelligence supply chains. And those are more invisible, which makes them more dangerous.
Let me challenge that with a listener question I can already hear. Someone is thinking, isn't global interdependence normal? We specialize, we trade, we share technology. Why treat intelligence systems differently from, say, importing cars or buying phones?
Because intelligence systems aren't just products. They're decision engines. If you import cars, you still control where you drive. If you depend on a foreign intelligence engine, it can shape where you think you should drive, what route is optimal, and what risks you even notice. And once your institutions integrate those engines, it's not a simple swap out. It becomes embedded. The dependency isn't just technical, it's operational and cultural.
That's a great segue. Let's break this into components. If intelligence sovereignty is the big umbrella, what are the actual layers a country should think about?
I usually frame it as 4 dimensions: data sovereignty, platform sovereignty, algorithmic sovereignty, and decision sovereignty.
Let's take them one at a time. Data sovereignty. This is the one people feel they already know, but what are they missing?
Data sovereignty asks very practical questions. Who owns the data? Where is it stored? Who can access it? Who can move it? Who can monetize it? And under what legal framework? A lot of countries are rewriting laws and procurement rules because they realize something. If your public sector data, health data, mobility data, or industrial data is effectively governed by another jurisdiction's defaults, then your leverage is limited.
And it's not only government data, it's corporate data too.
Exactly. If your largest industries run on data generated inside your borders, but the value creation happens elsewhere, then you're exporting raw material and importing finished intelligence.
That phrase, finished intelligence, is going to stick with people. Okay, next layer, platform sovereignty. What counts as a platform in this context?
Think cloud infrastructure, AI model providers, developer ecosystems, data warehousing stacks, identity systems, even the marketplaces where models, agents, and APIs are distributed. If your national research labs, banks, startups, and ministries all run their intelligence workloads on foreign platforms, then your sovereignty is conditional. It can be restricted by pricing, access, export controls, sanctions, outages, policy changes, or just competitive incentives.
And to be clear, no one is saying, never use foreign platforms, right? It's more about not being trapped.
Exactly. The issue isn't engagement. The issue is dependency without bargaining power. Sovereignty means you have credible alternatives, control points, and resilience.
All right. Third layer, algorithmic sovereignty. This one tends to sound intangible. What do you mean by sovereignty over algorithms?
Algorithms are the logic of your system. They decide how resources are allocated, what gets flagged, what gets recommended, what gets denied, what gets prioritized. So algorithmic sovereignty is about who controls the logic and incentives embedded in those systems. If the algorithms that shape your economy are imported and opaque, then outcomes are partially outsourced. Even if nobody intends harm, the optimization goals may not match your societal priorities.
Give me a concrete example without naming companies. What does a mismatch look like?
Imagine an AI system used in public services. It's trained to reduce cost per case as the dominant KPI. That sounds reasonable, but your national priority might be long-term social stability or equitable access or resilience. If the algorithm is tuned for the wrong objective, it will quietly reshape the system around that objective. Or take credit scoring. If the model's features and assumptions are built in one socioeconomic environment, imported into another, it can systematically misread risk, exclude whole groups, or push capital away from strategic sectors.
So algorithmic sovereignty is partly about transparency, but also about having the capacity to design and audit models in your own interest.
Yes, it's a capability issue. You need domestic talent, evaluation infrastructure, and governance that can actually interrogate models, not just accept them as magic.
Now the deepest layer you mentioned, decision sovereignty. That sounds philosophical, but I assume you mean something very operational.
I do. Decision sovereignty is about who ultimately makes the decisions that shape your society and what pressures influence those decisions. When AI systems become decision support for leaders, or when they automate parts of governance and business operations, the system's design choices start influencing what leaders see as possible, what they see as risky, and what they see as urgent. If those AI systems are external, you can end up with a kind of invisible steering. Not necessarily malicious, but structurally biased toward outside incentives.
That's unsettling. It also makes me think about how quickly organizations adopt tooling. They're thinking productivity today, not sovereignty tomorrow.
Right. And that brings us to the real tension, the short-term gains of adopting best-in-class global tools versus the long-term risk of surrendering the intelligence layer.
Let's zoom out. When people hear global struggle, they imagine spy movies or cyber attacks. But you're describing a quieter competition: standards, data centers, platforms, regulations, workforce, compute, and influence.
Exactly. The competition isn't only about stealing information. It's about shaping the architecture through which information becomes power.
Let's talk about how different regions are responding, because it's not one universal approach. Start with APAC. What patterns do you see?
In parts of APAC, you see heavy emphasis on building national or regional AI platforms and real-time data corridors. The goal is to reduce dependency and to accelerate domestic innovation at the same time. There's also a focus on speed, deploying AI into industry, logistics, government services, and smart infrastructure so that intelligence becomes a competitive advantage and not just a research topic.
So that's a build and scale approach. What about Europe?
Europe is often strongest on regulatory sovereignty. It's about rules of the road, data protection, AI governance, digital sovereignty frameworks, harmonizing standards across markets. The strategic bet there is, if you can shape the regulatory environment of a large market, you can influence global corporate behavior. That's a form of power. Not compute power, but rule-making power.
Some critics say regulation slows innovation. How do you see that trade-off?
It can slow certain forms of deployment, yes. But regulation can also create trust ecosystems. And trust ecosystems can be an innovation advantage if they enable adoption at scale without social backlash.
All right, North America. What's the dominant strategy there?
The US approach is largely innovation sovereignty. Control the frontier, led in foundational research, startups, venture, and large-scale model development. If you build the most advanced tools, you don't just sell products, you set the direction of the ecosystem. And when you set the direction, you attract talent, capital, and partnerships. That becomes a reinforcing loop.
So the leverage is, if the world runs on your tooling, your influence is built in.
Exactly.
Let's move to B.I.M. Intelligence sovereignty can sound like a luxury issue when economies are managing multiple urgent priorities. What's happening there?
In Latin America, one promising direction is regional data alliances. The idea is collective leverage. If a single mid-sized country tries to negotiate with global platforms, it can be hard. But if multiple countries align on standards, infrastructure projects, and procurement principles, they can create bargaining power. And you also see a focus on using data and AI for public goods. Mobility, fraud reduction, social programs, agriculture, disaster management. Those are areas where building domestic capability can quickly translate into real value.
Now Africa. You've said before that Africa's path might look different because the legacy stack is different. How does intelligence sovereignty show up there?
Africa has the possibility to leapfrog, but it's not automatic. The opportunity is mobile-first intelligence ecosystems and new digital public infrastructure that avoids some of the old dependencies. But the risk is also huge. If the dominant identity, payment, cloud, and AI layers are external and extractive, then value creation happens elsewhere. So intelligence sovereignty for Africa often becomes about building local data value chains, local compute strategies, and negotiating partnerships that don't lock in long-term dependency.
When you talk about dependency, it almost sounds like a return to older patterns, just in digital form.
That's the uncomfortable part. If raw data leaves and refined intelligence returns as a product you must buy, that resembles an extractive structure. Intelligence sovereignty is, in part, about preventing that pattern from becoming permanent.
Let's get explicit about what's at stake. What are the risks when a nation or a major institution loses intelligence sovereignty?
There are 4 major losses. 1. Economic leverage. If you don't control your intelligence layer, you may not capture the value created from your own data and industries. Productivity gains accrue elsewhere. 2. Political autonomy. If your information environment and decision systems are shaped externally, policy space shrinks. You can be nudged by dependencies you didn't vote for. 3. Security resilience. Dependency creates attack surfaces and pressure points. Even without a cyber attack, access restrictions or supply constraints can become security events. 4. The ability to shape your future. Because the intelligence layer is what you use to plan, simulate, forecast, allocate, and respond. If that layer isn't yours, you're playing with someone else's map.
That last line hits. Playing with someone else's map. And there's another subtle risk. You may not even realize your map is incomplete.
Exactly. You don't see what you're missing because the system defines what's visible.
Let's shift from diagnosis to prescriptions. If a government leader, a central bank official, or a CEO is listening and thinking, okay, we want intelligence sovereignty, what do we actually do? Not as a slogan, but as a roadmap.
First, build or strengthen national and sector-based data exchanges. That means creating the infrastructure and governance where data can be shared safely across public and private actors, with clear rules for access, value sharing, and security. Second, invest in domestic AI platforms where it matters. Not necessarily reinventing everything, but ensuring you have local capacity for critical services and the ability to run workloads without being at the mercy of external choke points.
So this isn't build your own everything. It's identify what must be sovereign.
Exactly. Third, form intelligence treaties or trusted partnerships. We already have defense treaties and trade agreements. Now we need agreements about data flows, model governance, shared infrastructure, and joint standards for AI safety and auditing. Fourth, establish ethical and strategic oversight that's capable, not ceremonial. Oversight bodies need technical expertise, access to evaluation tools, and real authority. Otherwise, it's just boxes being checked.
And the fifth,
develop sovereign simulation capacity for national planning. That means the ability to run scenarios and stress tests using your own models and assumptions. Economic shocks, supply chain disruptions, climate events, migration trends, public health, infrastructure failures. If you can simulate your future using systems aligned with your priorities, you gain strategic clarity. If you can't, your planning becomes reactive and dependent.
This is where it becomes obvious that intelligence sovereignty is infrastructure. Not a concept. It's something you build.
Yes, it's the new infrastructure of power.
Let me bring it to the organization level for a second, because not every listener is thinking as a nation-state. If I'm a multinational company, or even a fast-growing startup, what does intelligence sovereignty mean for me?
For organizations, it's similar logic. Where does your data live? Who can access it? Are your core workflows dependent on a single vendor's model? Can you migrate? Can you audit? Do you have internal capability to test and validate outputs? Do you control the decision logic, or are you renting it? If you're building products on top of external intelligence, you might be building a business that can be repriced or repermissioned out of existence.
So sovereignty is also about business continuity, not just geopolitics.
Exactly. It's resilience. It's bargaining power. It's the ability to make strategic decisions without hidden constraints.
I want to touch on one more tricky piece, the idea of open. Some people will say the answer to sovereignty is open source models, open standards, open data. Is that sufficient?
Open helps, but it's not sufficient, because you still need compute, skills, governance, and integration capacity. You can have an open model and still be dependent if you can't run it securely, evaluate it properly, or maintain it over time. And also, openness doesn't automatically solve the alignment problem. You can have open technology optimized for priorities that don't match your context. Sovereignty is about control, not just access.
So the big takeaway is, sovereignty isn't isolation. It's agency.
Exactly. Agency is a perfect word for it.
Before we close, I want to ask what you think the next decade looks like. If intelligence sovereignty is the defining challenge, what patterns will we likely see?
We'll see countries and regions competing to set standards. We'll see more scrutiny of cross-border data flows. We'll see strategic investment in compute and talent as national priorities. We'll see new alliances built around intelligence infrastructure, not just trade. And we'll see a separation between actors who can produce sovereignty-grade intelligence and those who must buy it. That separation will shape economic hierarchies.
And for listeners, the challenge is to notice it early, because by the time it's obvious, the systems are already entrenched.
That's right. Once the intelligence pipeline is locked in, changing it is like replacing the electrical grid while the city is still running.
Let's land this plane. Intelligence sovereignty is the question behind a lot of headlines. AI regulation, cross-border cloud restrictions, chip controls, data localization, digital public infrastructure, even debates about misinformation and algorithmic influence. But at its core, it's simple. Nations and organizations that can control their intelligence pipelines will shape what comes next. And those that can't will be shaped by others, often without realizing it. Nakel, thanks for coming back and making a complex topic feel tangible.
Always a pleasure, Soren. This is one of those conversations that needs to happen before the decisions are made for people.
And thank you for listening to the B.I. channel, where data meets decisions. If this episode sparked questions for you, take one idea and apply it this week. Ask where your intelligence comes from, what it depends on, and who ultimately has leverage over it. We'll see you next time.